After 10 years of up to 30% pay cuts, doctors are looking for extra income sources. Passive income, it does exist, but it can be elusive. And I think doctors have a passive income problem, okay? What are you feeling about wealth generation for private work? Ease of starting this, it's just a straight 5. Income generation, they just pay you straight away.
Property investing.
Me and Ed aren't massively into it. We're about to explain why. Oh, you can just, put 0 down and just get leveraged up. Well, how's your leverage working out? Leverage worked quite well when interest rates were 1%. How's it working right now? My stocks and shares portfolio is never going to phone me up in the middle of the night and go, hi, Tommy, I see that you own Apple shares and Apple's boiler has broken. That's a lot of tax-free investing per year. So I love it. Starting a business. If you are a doctor, okay, you're already got a job which pays you a reasonable amount of money. Is this going to start spitting out more money than you get paid as a doctor? In my opinion, incredibly. The only thing I would say about doing a ton of locum work is just think about your mental health. You have a skill which you have trained incredibly hard to get, and if you want to pay your bills, including your student loan and all those years and years of being in debt, and the NHS is no longer paying you enough to cover that, it's the obvious thing. Hopefully I'm not saying anything too controversial here, mate, but I think private work's going to... If you are looking to earn more, then this is the episode for you, because with the cost of living crisis, inflation, the up to 30% pay cuts for some doctors over the last 10 years, we understand that lots of doctors are looking to earn more income. So we are going to discuss some ways that doctors can earn more today, including some smarter ways that we think. And we're also going to dive deep into the tax scenario around some of these, because there are some tax traps around them. So this is part 3 of what we're calling our side hustle series, which has been running on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, hopefully you've seen part 1 and 2. If you're on the podcast, you won't have seen part 1 and 2. So your options are either go watch YouTube, or I'll give you a real quick summary. So in part 1, I talked about how to evaluate. If you're looking to start a side hustle, how do you evaluate whether it's a good idea? And I just use a simple 4-part framework for that, which is, does your side hustle solve a problem for someone or some people? Ideally, more people the better. Do you have a monetization plan with your side hustle? Are you passionate about your side hustle? And I talked about why that's especially important for doctors on the YouTube. And if you don't want too many competitors doing it, you need an unfair advantage. So that's part 1 on YouTube. Part 2 on YouTube, I talked a bit about leverage, which is a way to work less and earn more, which if you think that sounds like a scam, you should probably check out part 2 on YouTube, because leverage is a way of multiplying your efforts. I'm going to do a quick example of leverage in a minute after the intro. All right, mate, back on the podcast and YouTube today. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thank you, Tommy. It's good to see you again. How are you?
I'm good. This time yesterday, you won't believe it, but me and Ed were both wearing a suit, which is very rare, but we were on the cause of pushing Medic's money forward and we had to put a suit on. We've definitely gone the other way today, because I've gone Truckee Bees, and I mean, you look good, mate, but we're at the more casual end of the dress spectrum today.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I really hate wearing suits, quite frankly. So I'm very glad to be back in more comfortable clothes, and not to wear those awful shoes.
Oh, yeah, the shoes. My feet still hurt. I can sympathize with anyone who has to wear them every day. But that was yesterday. Today is today. We are launching straight into how we can help doctors to make more money, because we often talk about saving money and saving tax, and that is, I would definitely start there. But at a certain point, specifically after 10 years of up to 30% pay cuts, doctors are looking for extra income sources. So we are going to break down doing locums or waiting list initiatives, and we can talk about the pros and cons of those. We can talk about private work. We'll talk about a couple of other innovative income streams. So I think we should just get straight into it. But normally when we talk about this, the first question someone asks us is, oh, what about passive income? Passive income, it does exist, but it can be elusive. And I think doctors have a passive income problem, okay? And I talked about this in the YouTube video, but I'm going to quickly go through it now, okay? So, hey, check out this as well, right? I've got a new toy, which you're going to see if you're watching YouTube. So I'm just going to demonstrate to you why doctors have a problem with this. So if you're a doctor, okay, you go to work for 1 hour, I apologize for the red pen, by the way. I couldn't find a black one, and I found a green pen, but I don't know about you, but green pen reminds me of when I was a doctor on the wards. The pharmacist always used to write in green pen. It'd be like, Dr. Perkins, are you sure you wish to prescribe this drug with a patient with an EGFR 10? And you're like, oh, no, you're right. As it goes, thanks. So green pen bring back traumatic memories from the pharmacist. And hi to all our pharmacy colleagues out there. Thanks for what you do. So I'm in red pen. So you're a doctor. You work for 1 hour, okay? You receive 1 hour of pay. Let's call it £1. Things haven't got that bad yet, but if pay cuts carry on the way they are, maybe that will be a reality one day. And if you want more money as a doctor, you have to work more hours because you're trading 1 hour of your time for 1 hour of your money. Okay. And that is a bit of a problem because doctors already work hideously long hours. So we're going to talk about this, some methods that we think have a bit of leverage. Okay. So leverage is this. Okay. Let's just say I spend 1 hour doing something with leverage. And I did a whole YouTube on this. So I'm just doing a quick summary today. But let's say I write a book, okay? And I spend 1 hour writing it, okay? And then I sell 4 books, okay? So I've got leverage there because I've translated 1 hour of my time into 4 units of money, okay? So you can either do more work and get more money, or obviously stating the obvious, if you wish to do a quarter of the work and get the same money, that is possible, okay? So that is leverage. I think this is a really important skill to understand for doctors because doing extra work, doing extra hours, yeah, it's great. We're going to talk about that. But if you can get leverage, it's generally good. And we're going to talk about some things that have leverage. So true Blue Peter style, here is one I prepared earlier. My writing is pretty average. Okay, so the categories we're going to break down is ease of starting. Okay, how easy is it to get started with this new income stream? How much money will you make? Income generation potential, like initially. Will you get paid initially, or will it take years to make any money? The opposite of that, I guess, is wealth generation. Is this going to generate, wealth for you going forward? Is this an asset that you can allow to accumulate over time? Passive question mark. So that's basically kind of alluding to leverage that I just talked about. Ed's going to talk about the tax situation, which is really important. We're going to give it a score out of 25, and we're going to tell you which one wins. I don't actually know either because we haven't scored it. So first one we are going to talk about, mate, is, am I going to group Locum and waiting list initiative together?
Yeah, let's do both.
Okay. So Locum or waiting list initiative. So I think like 0 to 5 for the scores. Yeah. So ease of starting, this has got to be a 5. I mean, there's tons of locum work out there. There's more locum work than anyone could do. Do you think that's fair?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I think yeah, 5.
I do hear on the grapevine that locum work for GPs have slowed down a bit, but I'm just going to say, yeah, there's plenty of waiting list initiatives going on. So I'm going to give it a 5. Income generation. So how quickly do you generate the income doing a locum or waiting list initiative? Pretty quick, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. You go, you do the work, you get paid within the month usually, don't you?
Unless NHS payroll do something wrong or something like that. But yeah, ideally within the month. So what do you want to give that? Are we going 5 again?
Yeah, I would.
All right. Locum work is looking good right now, but there is a sting in this locum work tail. Don't you worry. Wealth generation. So what I mean by this, or what we mean by this is this an asset that is going to accumulate, appreciate over time? And is it going to allow you to start leveraging your time, like the diagram that I just showed you? What are your thoughts on that, mate?
So I think it's going to score quite lowly for that category. I think that's where
I'm thinking 0. Like,
yeah, I think 0 or 1, but I think no 0. Actually, there isn't any wealth generations there, basically.
nah. Are we going 0 or 1?
Let's go 0.
Yeah, I know my 5 times table, whereas I might struggle to add up odd numbers. Okay, passive rating. I mean, that's just a straight 0, okay? Just have a look at this diagram, okay? If you are doing locum work, you are trading 1 hour of your time for 1 hour of your money. So there is no passive income rating there. Tax, mate, this is your forte. Tell us what you need to know if you're thinking about doing locum work or waiting list initiative work from a tax point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing to say is that it kind of depends on the type of locum. Okay, so I'll come on to that a bit more in a second. But generally, for hospital doctor locums and doctors doing waiting list initiatives, they're usually doing that when they're classified as employees. Okay, and therefore will be taxed accordingly. So, a lot of you guys are or if not all of you guys, will be already employees, so you know the drill there. So you're taxed according to the income tax rates of your country, which in most of the UK is 20%, 40%, or 45%. But of course, in Scotland, there's a few more rates: 19%, 20%, 21, 42, and 47%. So you're taxed at your income tax rate. There's also national insurance as well, which around the UK is 12% on any salary between 12,570 up to 50,270, and then 2% above that. Okay, so if you start to do extra locum work or waiting list initiative, then you should be paying your marginal rate of income tax, which again, as I said, in most of the UK is 10, 20, 45. So sorry, 20, 40, 45. And then national insurance for most people, if you start to take on extra work, you should be paying 2% national insurance. Now, just want to say on that note, two things, okay, which just to give you a bit of extra value for this video. If you're doing a hospital locum or a waiting list initiative, make sure you definitely keep an eye on your tax code, something that we at Medics Money we talk about all the time, because it's so easy for that tax code to go wrong in the NHS. Okay, so keep an eye on your tax code. If you locum for a different trust, which you may not do, but if you do work for a different trust, then HMRC might kind of mess up your tax code. If you see a tax code that says BR0T or D0 next to where it says tax code on your locum payslip, that might be okay. But if your main job payslip starts to display one of those tax codes I just said, BR0T or D0, you're likely paying the wrong amount of tax. Okay, so if you do start locum, watch out. It may change your tax code by mistake, and you may end up overpaying tax in particular. If you are worried about your tax code, if you go to our website, medicsmoney.co.uk, we've got a blog all about tax codes and what to do if they're wrong. Okay, so that's the first thing to mention. The second thing is you also might end up potentially overpaying national insurance. So if you already have a salary over £50,270, then you should be paying 2% national insurance on any extra employment income you receive over that. Okay, if you work for a different trust, they may not realise that your situation, and they may start charging you 12% national insurance instead of the 2%. So you may overpay national insurance as well. Okay, so if you think you've overpaid national insurance, if you think it's 12% and not 2%, if you contact the National Insurance Contributions Office, they can help you sort that out. And I think I met up with a really, really close friend yesterday. He's an anaesthetist, and he had exactly the same issue. And the National Insurance Contributions Office just sorted it out on the phone for him. Way more helpful than their HMRC colleagues, basically. So definitely think about that. Okay. If you're a GP thinking about locuming, you actually have a couple of extra options. Okay, so it's really important just to mention these from a tax perspective, because GP locums, they have the option to be self-employed, or even if they wanted to trade via a limited company. For anyone who becomes self-employed, you pay income tax just as you would have done as an employee, but you pay the income tax on your taxable profits as opposed to your salary, and you're paying a slightly lower national insurance rate. So instead of 12% for that income band that I mentioned, it's 9%, so a slight decrease. Okay. Other things to note as well, though, you'd need to register with HMRC for self-employment and start completing self-assessment tax returns. And then, obviously, rather than no one's going to take income tax off your income for you. If you get paid a chunk of income, nobody takes off any income tax on national insurance, etc. if you're self-employed. So you need to make sure that you keep aside a proportion of your income and then make payments to HMRC when they're due. That's usually under what's called the payment on account regime. You make tax payments in January and July of each year. Final thing to say, if you are a GP locum and you're self-employed, you can pension up to 90% of your income that you receive and therefore take advantage of the NHS pension. Now, GP locums can also, if they wanted to, set up a limited company and trade that way as well. The way tax works for companies, and I'm going to go into this in a bit of detail here because it applies to some of the other things we're going to be talking about a bit later. So I'm going to cover it off now. Companies pay corporation tax on their profits at 19% if your profits are below 50,000 and 25% if above 250,000. And then between those two profit levels, you get something called marginal relief, which reduces your tax bill, but basically works out with a marginal tax rate of 26.5%, which basically means every pound of profit you earn in that bracket, you're paying basically 26.5% tax. Companies don't pay any national insurance, and any income received, you can't pension that income. So if you were to operate via a company, you can't pension any of the income that you receive. Okay. There's also more admin if you set up a company because you've got to file accounts at Companies House. You've got to do corporation tax returns. There are various other forms that Companies House will insist that you do, usually yearly. Then the big rub, well, there are two big rubs really for if you set up a company, but the biggest one in many ways is if you need to take the money out, how does that work for tax? Because it basically adds on an extra layer of taxation here. So if you need to take money out of the company, how do you do that? Well, you can either pay yourself a salary, and then of course you're paying income tax and national insurance, just like you would do if you were locum in as an employee. Your company will also have to pay employers' national insurance. So that's another cost. That's 13.8% of that salary. The alternative, you can pay out the company's profits as dividends, which are taxed at a slightly lower rate. So those are rates of 8.75% if you're a basic rate taxpayer, 33.75% for higher rate taxpayers, and 39.35% for additional higher rate taxpayers. So overall, if you want to trade via a company, in any of these scenarios that we're going to mention, definitely think about getting specialist advice from a specialist medical accountant. Consider if realistically it is actually worth doing versus the other options of being an employee or being self-employed. Of course, the other thing, which I'm not going to go into huge details here, is of course the IR35 scenario, which a lot of you people watching or listening will remember, is that situation where someone sets up a company, but basically HMRC think of it as a disguised employment and basically ignore the company and treat you as an employee, even though you set up a company. Okay. Now, again, this is a really important thing to mention, okay, for people that do want to locum or take on extra work under the waiting list initiative and so on, okay. When you consider taking on extra work, it's really important to consider what's called your marginal rate of tax. We've already had one example of that when I talked about the corporation tax stuff a little bit ago, okay. Your marginal rate, that's the tax rate you pay on an additional £1 earned, and that may not be the same as the actual tax rates laid down by law. Okay. The classic instance where this is different is where your income, or basically adjusted net income to be precise, where that exceeds £100,000. At that level of income, you should be paying an income tax rate of 40% in the UK, aside from Scotland, where it would be 42%. Now, when you go above £100,000, the government will start to take away £1 of your personal allowance, your tax-free personal allowance, for every £2 your adjusted net income exceeds £100,000. So you basically end up, when you crunch the numbers, you end up paying a 60% marginal tax rate on each additional £1 that you earn. So it's important to think about that. Your tax rate isn't, let's say you're in England, it's not 40%. You're losing your personal allowance when you go above that level of income. So your tax rate, your marginal tax rate is 60%, which is obviously higher. And it gets worse for some people. If you've got children, if you go even just £1 above £100,000 of adjusted net income, you lose access to something called the tax-free childcare scheme, where the government gives up to £2,000 a year per child towards childcare costs, which, you could think, well, let's say you are on, £99,999, and you think, I'm going to do this, waiting list initiative for a couple of £1,000s. That could cost you a lot of money if you then lose access to the tax-free childcare scheme. And then finally, on that note, if your adjusted net income is £50,000 and you're claiming child benefit, then as your adjusted net income goes above 50,000, the government start clawing back any child benefit received via what's called the higher income child benefit charge, such that by £60,000 of adjusted net income, you have to pay back the entirety of the child benefit that you've received. So just think about it. If you're doing an extra locum shift, getting additional employment income, or locum income as a sole trader for a GP locum, or you get dividends from your own company, just think about what impact that additional income might have on your marginal tax rate. We're not trying to dissuade people from doing extra work. There's a cost of living crisis. The NHS is screaming out for help and getting waiting times down, etc., etc. We're just merely pointing out that extra shift may actually have unexpected consequences for your tax position, and needs to be really considered carefully, especially definitely regarding that tax-free childcare scheme, because that could be a really costly, well, not error, but it could be a costly mistake, I guess, error, if you take on an extra shift and end up losing access to that scheme. Okay, so appreciate I've spoken quite a lot, and we need to work out how on earth we're going to score that. but it is just just something we thought was quite important. And as I say, it lays the foundations for the other types of income we're going to talk about as well.
Mate, we might be wearing our tracksuit bottoms and no longer wearing our fancy shoes like yesterday, but you've come out absolutely swinging there. There was just like value after value there. Right, that was. I'm going to try and give a summary to make sure for mere mortals that we've understood it correctly. But if you thought that was useful and you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave us some kind of comment because it helps the algorithm. If you're listening on the podcast, we really appreciate all your ratings and reviews, not because it helps mine and Ed's egos, but because it helps other doctors to discover our podcast. So just if that helped you, give us a rating. We don't, there's no cost for this podcast, but it ain't free. You got to leave us a nice rating if you find it useful. So how to summarize it. So basically, if you're going PAYE, what's your tax code, right? And you explain that. We got a guide on that. The national insurance tip, absolutely great tip. And everyone loves our tax guide because it saves doctors thousands of pounds on super expensive fees like GMC and exams. Definitely check out the guide on our website if you haven't got that. But your national insurance tip, we get people who are just like, I've never heard of this before and I heard about it on your podcast. Thank you so much. So don't neglect that national insurance tip. And great that your anaesthetist mate has got a refund. I'm assuming that was as a direct result of a conversation with his good friend, Dr. Ed Cantello. Is that fair?
I think he's an avid listener of all our Medics Money stuff. So absolutely.
Well, you better have left a review and subscribed on YouTube. And then you talked to me about the marginal rate. This is absolutely key. Like, if you get caught in one of those marginal rate tax traps that Ed mentions, extra work in a logical, straightforward tax system should result in extra money. But if you get caught in one of those marginal rate tax, especially if you get stung by that tax-free childcare trap over 100K of adjusted net income, something that we've been banging on about for years, it is punitive. So watch out for that, okay? You said that you can't pension your locum work if you're a GP locum and via a limited company, which is another thing that non-specialist accountants miss all the time, and you have to factor that into your calculations. I'm going to add a quick clarification that you could pension that work into a private pension, but not the NHS pension. So that's what Ed was talking about there. We see non-specialist accountants advising GP locums all the time, and they haven't even talked about that. That is just absolutely ridiculous. So great work. Limited company, I'm glad you talked about that because that's going to be very relevant to our next category of work, which we're going to talk about. Spoiler, you talked about IR35. Wow. You talked about tax-free childcare. What did I miss? That was an epic delivery of the basics there.
Yeah, no, I think that was one of the main points. Absolutely. So a lot of food for thought just for thinking about taking on an extra locum shift.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're thinking, oh no, that means what am I going to do for extra money? Keep watching because we've got some all right ideas coming up, I reckon. Right, back to my amazing hand-drawn diagram, which is being held in place by my hand. Thank you so much to everybody who's asked about my hand. As you can see, my thumb, index finger, and middle finger got chopped clean off. You can kind of see the scar there. Things are going okay. Middle finger's got some issues, but thank you so much for everyone who asked, and more thank you to everyone who helped me from HEMS, the paramedics, amazing St. George's team. You know who you are, but thank you. And it's been so great to meet so many of you while I spent most of the summer in St. George's. I went there every 3 days on average for about 8 weeks, but making progress. So what's the score, mate? What are we going to give it? I don't even want to score it. I'm just going to say I'm going to do what you say.
It is really hard to score, but I think you've got to score lower than certain other categories because in general, income tax is than other taxes, which might apply to other situations. You've got national insurance, you've got the marginal tax rate trap. It's going to score low. Okay, I wouldn't necessarily say zero because at least, if you're in some situations, for example, if you're a hospital doctor, there is a little bit of ease in terms of people just doing the paying the tax, doing the pay as you earn system and paying the tax for you. Although, of course, that often doesn't go quite right with the old payroll companies. But I mean, what do you reckon? 1, 2? It's not going to be zero.
I was thinking 1.
Sounds good.
If you say 1, that's good enough for me. If you disagree in the comments. So 1. So I'm doing maths in public, speed maths here. I need your help. I'm going to give that a total of 11, right?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Yeah. So that's locum work or waiting list initiatives. Okay, the next category that I think we've got to talk about, and we are getting way more inquiries about this than this time last year. So we see the data, and that is private work. Okay, so private work, not an area that I'm experienced in, but I have spoken to lots of colleagues who are doing it, so I have got some kind of ideas to throw in here. But like I said, if you disagree with our ratings, disagree in the comments on YouTube. Algorithm loves that. We went viral on TikTok the other day, over 700,000 views, and it was just me explaining the NHS pension scheme, and loads of people in the comments saying you don't understand pensions, you've got it all wrong. But actually, what it was is that they didn't understand the NHS pension was slightly different. So anyway, TikTok, ease of starting private work. What do you think, mate?
I it's a tough one, isn't it? I don't really. I've never done it myself. Never set up a private work practice, and I don't. I guess it's quite a lot. There's quite a lot to think about, isn't there? I don't think it's definitely not going to be as easy to do as taking a locum shift. Absolutely, you're going to have to think about quite a lot of different things, and your insurance, actually, how you're going to trade. Do you need other things? Do you need premises? Do you need tools? Do you need what do you need? So there's definitely going to be some difficulties. I'm not going to say it's difficult, but difficulties in setting this up. I don't
Yeah,
know. What do you think?
3.
Yeah, I'd go for three. Middle of the road.
Yeah,
Because you got your knowledge.
yeah, exactly. It's not as hard. It's not as easy as you said as just doing a locum shift, but it's not as hard as some of the other things we've got coming up. So we've got to score that accordingly. Yeah, I feel like we should have got those little things that they have on Strictly. I've been watching Strictly with my daughters and my son. It's loving it, actually. Is it okay to admit that? Okay, income generation. So again, just to remind you, this is like how easy is it to just turn up and get paid? What are your thoughts on this for private work?
I thought it'd be fairly decent, to be honest. I guess you got to take control of the making sure you get the income. I guess you got to go and actually source the work yourself potentially. Then you got to make sure that you actually invoice the people that you're doing the work for. Then you got to make sure you get that your cash in. So you're starting to actually operate more as a business now, aren't you? Than turning up for work to do a local shift and going again. So there's a little bit, it's more nuanced, but you'd have thought for sort of medical private practice work, it shouldn't be that. It should be quite good, I'd have thought.
Yeah, I guess like in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like cash flow is an issue, and if you don't run a business and you're not familiar with cash flow, what it basically means is like how much money do you have to spend before the money comes in, right? So I think you got to spend a bit before it comes in, and like you say, you got to bill it and stuff. So I mean, this is like I was sitting on the fence a bit here, but I'm feeling this could be like a 3.
I think that's fair. You got to so you got to source the work. You've got to then bill people for the work. You then got to chase up the money. There
Okay,
are, there are
yeah.
various things software you can use to help with that. But I think three's a perfectly good rating for that.
What are you feeling about wealth generation for private work?
So I think this is it's again definitely going to be better than for locum etc. I mean, with private work, it depends. There are probably going to be you know situations where this isn't quite as appropriate, but if you're going to have you could potentially be building up a business which has quite a bit of value to it. So there will be some potential wealth generation if you have a business that is quite profitable, and down the line you could grows in value. So it's really tough. I mean, like, again, I'm sure it's going to depend on the actual what you're doing and the business you're running, etc. But again, I think about three again. I reckon 2 or 3. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm feeling a 3. Well, I was thinking 2 because although you are building up a business, it's notoriously hard to sell the private practice. And it goes back to my diagram that I drew here because in the private practice, you're still you're exchanging 1 hour of your time for 1 unit of money. Yes, you're exchanging it for more units of money than if you were in the NHS. Sweeping statement, but probably true. But you're still fixed to that 1 hour of time to 1 hour of money. And I'm feeling 2, mate. I'm going to go 2,
Sounds
which kind
good.
of leads on to the passive rating of this.
Mm.
I mean, it's not 0 because of the reasons that you outlined, but I'm going to give that a 1. Do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It's gonna be 0, but it's gonna be very low, isn't it?
Yeah, you're still on that, 1 hour of time for 1 unit of money. And I did show an example of a doctor who has managed to scale. So stop exchanging 1 hour of their time for 1 hour of money by employing other people to do the work. I did that in the YouTube video. I think it's quite a neat example. It is possible. I know that there's people who are doing it. I'm listening to this. So if you want to drop it in the comments, let us know. But what are we going, 1?
Yeah, let's go for 1.
All right, tax. I have nothing to add. So whatever you say, I'm going to agree with.
Yeah, so in terms of tax, a lot of what I've already said already is going to apply. So basically, if you're doing private work, again, you got to think to yourself, well, how am I going to trade? How am I actually going to go about getting this private work and doing this private work? What business structure am I going to use? And I'd imagine that a lot of people doing this would have the ability to set up a kind of a separate business to their main job. It may be that this does become their main business, their main job, but a lot of people probably would have the ability potentially to have a separate business to their main job, and as such, you've got various options again about how you set up, doing this private work. Will you be a sole trader, basically as in self-employed, or will you set up a company? And if you do have an actual main job, and this is you're doing private work on the side, trading via a company may become more attractive because you may not necessarily have to take all that money out of the company. So when the like I said before, one of the issues we have in a company is it's not just a case that you're paying that lower corporation tax and no national insurance and all this stuff, which a lot of people think that's brilliant, that sounds really good. The issue is then when you get the money out of the company, how are you going to do that? And the income taxes that flow from that. But if some people might have the option to keep a lot of that money in the company and then take the money out in stages when they want to. You could even, some people even, and I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be the case for a lot of people, but you could even keep the money in the company, and when you finally end the company, strike it off and take it out as capital rather than as income. So you've got a little more, you've got more options. We talked about how, if you're doing private work, you have a company, they can be notoriously not the easiest things to sell as businesses. But if you are able to do that, if you do actually set up do private work that does end up being able to be, a sellable company, again, I'm not saying that will be the case, and it is, as Tommy alluded to, quite difficult. But if you do, you can take advantage of quite generous, what we call business asset disposal relief, or entrepreneurs relief as it used to be called, in which you pay a lower 10% capital gains tax on the first £1 million of profits and 20% over that. So it's definitely going to be better from a tax perspective, or it should be potentially better from a tax perspective. Of course, as always, everyone's personal circumstances are different. It's impossible to cater for every single different person out there and every different type of work. But I'd have thought this is going to get a better rating, not like stellar, but maybe like a two or three, but two, I reckon, for this. Given as you say, the issues with trying to actually sell the company if you're doing private work.
In no way am I trying to fix this or manipulate the results, but if we give it a 2, it's going to tie with locum work. And I'm feeling that tax efficiency, I think there's quite a lot you could do here. We've talked about this at length in the past. So could I possibly give you a 3?
Yeah, you've got a lot more flexibility, and there are some significant upside potential here.
Boom. I've given it a 3. Gets a 12. Okay. Yeah. Next source of income. Yeah. Next source of income. This is one that I used to use a lot, right? And I like it. And it is completing surveys. So coincidentally, at the moment, Medics Money's blog posts are being sponsored by a company that will pay you money to fill in surveys about, what drugs you prescribe, what do you think of new drugs, etc. So check out our website if you haven't checked that out. But essentially, you fill out a survey and they pay you money. Downsides of this is like when I was a junior doctor, they pay the more senior you are, the more they pay you. So I'm just going to throw that in there. But I used to use this all the time, and I absolutely loved it because, well, I'll tell you why I love it as we go through. So ease of starting this, it's just a straight 5. You literally go to our website, click the link, you register, and then they send you the details. You think that's fair?
Yeah, it's very easy, definitely.
Yeah. Income generation, they just pay you straight away. You have to worry about collecting the income or anything like that. I'm giving that a straight 5. Wealth generation, it's got to be a 0, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. We're motoring through this now. Passive income rating. Now, we're still in that thing. I don't want to keep showing my diagram, but you're still exchanging 1 unit of your time for 1 hour of money. But what I found is that you could just fill these surveys in on your phone in a sort of, a gap in your day. So although it's still 1 hour of time for 1 hour of money and so strictly not passive, I think it does have that kind of, it's just easy. So I don't know. Don't let me talk you into things. What should I give it for passive?
Yeah, as you say, it is. I think because of the ease and being able to do it whenever you want. I think 2 or 3. There is still some. There is still some.
I'm feeling a 3.
It's not fully passive, but it's still as passive as it can be, really. Given that you're making some.
I guess like instead of like scrolling Yeah, instead of scrolling TikTok and watching Medix Money's amazing TikTok videos, you could be making money. And our videos on TikTok are good, but not as good as actually making money. So I'm feeling a three, mate.
Sounds good.
Tax, right? There must be some kind of sting or tax trap. Give us a tax lowdown.
Yeah. So with this, you know, income from completing surveys, you know, it should be classified basically as what we call miscellaneous income because it's not actually really employment income, and obviously it's not self-employment income, etc. So it should be classified as miscellaneous income, and as such, the first £1,000 of income that you receive for this, you know, should be covered by what's called the trading allowance, which is a bit of a funny name because it covers not just trading income, but also miscellaneous income. So, if you receive income from completing surveys and it's less than £1,000, there shouldn't be any tax to pay. You don't need to do a self-assessment tax return for that. You don't need to tell HMRC. So, pretty good, really. You know, up to £1,000 of tax-free income. Just out of interest, just for completeness here, I wanted to say it's the same thing that really applies to income received from cremation forms, by the way. So, for those of you who haven't been aware of that, we've got a blog all about cremation from income as well. It's that strange trading allowance because it applies to miscellaneous income. You know, that's why a lot of people that get crem forms don't have to do a tax return and don't have to tell HMRC and pay tax on it. So yeah, actually, really, really good. As long as you don't go over £1,000, when you would have to potentially start doing tax returns and telling HMRC, you know, £1,000 of income tax free with a separate tax free allowance. So I'll go five to be honest, because it is so good. You know,
Strong.
when else would you use that amount? I guess unless you're trading already, or you got £1,000 of cremation form income.
Yeah,
You know, not many people will have that. So
mate,
yeah,
I love it. And this is just this like specific tax knowledge that I love because I bet a lot of people are sat there thinking, "Oh, I don't want to, hit my marginal rate, or I don't want to lose some tax-free childcare from completing surveys." Well, as you say, as long as it's under 1,000 miscellaneous, and you got another miscellaneous income, it's about as tax efficient as it gets. Because, yeah, I love it. All right, so
18.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's 18. Good, good. It's always good to have the accountant in the house. I've also drawn another line. Okay, next category. Are we just saying investing, or are we saying specifically property investing? I think we're going property investing, right?
Yeah. If we thought about property investing, let's go for that.
Okay, cool. This is something that lots of doctors love. Me and Ed aren't massively into it. We're about to explain why, partly, I'm imagining. But let's just say ease of starting property investing. I don't think it's that easy. I'm sure all the property gurus are screaming at their podcast right now. What are you feeling? I'm feeling like a two.
Yeah, I'll go for two. I mean, I don't think I'm not going to say it's necessarily. You know, when you say we're not into it, it's more that I don't really have the capital in the first place. I don't really want the cost of taking on a second mortgage, etc., etc. So, and maybe not, especially with the interest rates as they are. So, and yeah, you've got to obviously source the property. You've got to then actually acquire it and all sorts of things. So, it's not going to be the easiest thing in the world to do. So, I think I personally would give it a reasonably lowish rating.
Great to clarify that. I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole, but we've done a whole YouTube on like the pros and cons of property investing, exactly as you just said, like capital intensive. And people are saying, oh, you can just, put zero down and just get leveraged up. Well, how's your leverage working out? Leverage worked quite well when interest rates were 1%. How's it working right now? Let me know in the comments. I think we know the answer. You need capital up front. The tax situation you're going to tell us about, it's not pretty. I just find stocks and shares investing automatically every month, direct debit, no dramas, a lot easier. Declaration of interest. I do have quite a large property investment, but it's a really niche one. If you're a GP partner, you'll know that we own, or you can own part of your surgery. So that is got some advantages over, for example, buy to let investing. And we've done a whole YouTube video on why holiday rentals could make sense. So check that out. But yeah, I've forgotten what score you said, mate, before I went on my little tangent.
I think we're thinking sort of lowish, like two, three. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm thinking
I've
two.
never invested in property, so I feel a little bit like I'm imagining things that are difficult. But it does seem to me like it is actually generally not the easiest thing in the world to do.
Yeah, I think it's like, yeah, I think that's fair. Income generation, how quickly do you get, how easy is it to get that money? So I guess if we said like locum work, you just sort of get paid straight away, in theory. Property investing, I'm feeling it's not great, not that great.
Well, I mean, I guess you got to first of all find a tenant, haven't you? You got to actually start off by finding someone that's going to then rent that property off you, whether it's whatever type of property you're acquiring, and then then they'll pay your rental income. I imagine you get that money like monthly. I mean, it's definitely, yeah. So I'll probably go for a three, I think, for that, mate.
Exactly what I was thinking. Three, definitely. Okay. Wealth generation. I like it for this,
Yeah, I mean,
and
historically,
that's,
very good. Sure.
why. Absolutely. What are you feeling here?
Probably a five, 4 or 5. I mean, it's high, very high. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, past performance does not represent
That's the
future
thing, yeah.
returns. Insert disclaimer, etc., etc. I
Absolutely.
just think I'm giving this a five, mate. Seriously. Passive. All right. I guess I do have a property investment, so I can speak to this. My stocks and shares portfolio is never going to phone me up in the middle of the night and go, "Hi, Tommy. I see that you own Apple shares, and Apple's boiler has broken. Can you send a plumber around?" Okay, that's why I prefer investing in stocks and shares. Whereas if you are renting properties and you've probably had that call in the past, I know you can get people to manage it for you and take all the stress out of it. They also destroy your profit margin. I know that sometimes all tenants are great, but some tenants are terrible. Passive income rating for property, I don't know. It's like maybe two.
Yeah, as you say, it's so variable, isn't it? Because I'm sure there are people out there that rent out property and get no trouble at all from anyone, and that rental income goes into their bank account every month, and jobs are good, but there must be some people out there that just it's a bit of an absolute nightmare to in terms of that. So
All right. Should we go three? Middle of the road.
let's go three.
Yeah, I think it's got huge passive potential, but it's also got not potential. Tax score. What do you want to say about this, mate?
Yeah. So again, before we get to the score, let's give it a little bit of a background because there are a number of things to think about when it comes to property and the tax consequences. So, firstly, of course, you've got to acquire the property, and when you're doing that, you have to pay stamp duty, land tax. Now, if you're buying a second residential property or a third or fourth, whatever you're buying, you're basically going to have to pay an extra 3% stamp duty compared to what you would normally pay. So, for example, instead of 0% on the first £250,000 of the value of the property, you'd pay 3%, and then you'd pay 8% on the next £675,000 of value instead of 5%, and so on. So, basically, you get 3% stamp duty added on to the purchase. That's the same in Northern Ireland as well. In Scotland, they've got the land and buildings transaction tax, which is even higher rates of stamp duty for second properties, with an extra 6% added to each rate, as opposed to 3% in England and Northern Ireland. There are also more rates, more rate thresholds that are lower, more rates. It's more basically overall, it's more expensive to buy a second property in Scotland. So if you're thinking about buying a property anywhere in the UK, but in particular Scotland, just think about the stamp duty cost of doing that. In Wales, just to include Wales, they've got a land transaction tax, which adds an extra 4% stamp duty on acquiring more property. So, first of all, you've got to buy the property and bear in mind that there's going to be significant stamp duty costs of doing that. Okay. Once you own the property and you start renting it out, you've got to let HMRC know and then start paying income tax on the rental profits that you make. Okay. That's rental profits above the first £1,000, which is covered by a special property allowance. Much like we talked about that trading allowance, there's also a special one for property as well. You then take the rental income, you deduct any allowable expenses, so insurance premiums, agent fees, commissions, genuine repairs, and so on. And then your profits are taxed at your income tax rate, which is either going to be 20%, 40%, or 45% in most of the UK. In Scotland, it'll be 19, 20, 21, 42, or 47%, depending on what tax you're paying. In terms of interest on the or mortgage interest, you can get some help with that in terms of tax. Basically, once you've worked out your tax liability, you should get a 20% tax credit for any mortgage interest that you pay. It's like a tax reducer. It's a bit complicated. I won't go into it too much, but essentially, you should get a 20% tax credit for any mortgage interest you pay on your property. If you've got a furnished holiday let or you're renting commercial property, you basically get tax free for the whole of the mortgage interest. But for residential property, they're basically capping the amount of tax relief you get for mortgage interest. And then finally, going for the
Mate,
whole
that is
life.
an absolute. Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, no, go for it. So I was going to say just to finish it all off. If going for the life cycle of the property, when you sell the property, you've got to pay capital gains tax on the difference between the sales proceeds and the cost of acquiring the property. Capital gains tax that's payable at 18% if you're a basic rate taxpayer, or 28% if you're a higher or additional higher rate taxpayer. And unlike stamp duty, that's the same throughout the UK. So a number of things to think about when you buy, when you sell, and when you actually own the property in the meantime.
Mate, that was awesome. There's way more to it than that, and I'm sure all the property fans will be in the comments section. But yeah, I was just going to say about the mortgage interest relief if it's a furnished holiday let or commercial property, because that is a significant consideration. So just have a think about that. Awesome. Back to our little table then. What score should I give property, mate, for tax
Oh,
efficiency potential?
yeah. I mean, it's again difficult to well, it's all been difficult to score really. It's no like obvious. It's definitely this, definitely that. Well, some of them, okay, sometimes it is, but for this, you've got to think about when you sell your house, for example, capital gains tax is much lower than income tax, but you've got quite significant potential stamp duty at the front. You've got to actually deal with the rental income tax in the middle. When you actually get the rental income, rental profits, you've got to pay the tax on that. You've got to make the payments under the payment on account system. You've got to tell HMRC, do returns. So it's not, the end of it, when you get that lovely, if you fingers crossed it's gone up in value and you're selling it, that's going to be at a much lower capital gains tax rate than you would pay if you got that money as income tax. So there are some benefits, definitely, some disadvantages. I'm going to go middle of the road and do a 3. That's what I would say as a score. Again, people may disagree with that. It's not, how much do you value the lovely capital gains tax rate at the end, which is much lower than income tax, versus the paying of the stamp duty costs up front, the rental income elements of that. It's generally seen as well that right or wrongly, that governments are less keen on people, buying additional houses, for example, to rent out. Throughout the UK, different administrations do seem to be making it a little bit more difficult as time goes on. Things may change even worse than that as time goes on, but who knows what's going to happen, I guess.
I think that final point is a great point. Like, taxation policy is designed to drive behavior. If you actually drill back into what the government have done to change the taxation of, for example, buy to let, it's obvious that they're literally trying to crush buy to let, certainly small investors who can't run it via a limited company, maybe. So, taxation policy should drive your behavior. So, yeah, I just think if you look at the history of what the successive governments have done here, they're trying to drive you away from this for whatever reason. So I think that makes 16 for property investing. Do you concur, accountant?
I do indeed. Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
I feel under pressure doing maths in public. Now, I just want to add a really quick one here, right? Because we've talked about property, okay? But we have kind of missed off investing, okay? So by this, right, I'm just going to add a quick cheeky category here of investing. So I mean investing in stocks and shares, something that we talk about all the time. Okay, so I'm going quick on this one. Ease of starting. Well, you do need to know what you're doing, so you can consult a financial advisor like the ones on Medic's Money. It's perfectly possible to do it yourself as well, but you really do need to know what you're doing. But it is so. When I first started investing, however many years ago it was now, I think it could be like 12 years ago, it was very hard. There wasn't all these online platforms, and it wasn't that easy. But now it's very easy, arguably too easy for some people. But I'm going to give this, like, to get started in a simple investment strategy, I'm going to give that a 4. Income generation, so like money now. I think it's one of the big myths about investing is that people start investing and they think, oh, I'm going to start making tons of passive income per month. Well, if you think about, let's say you average 6% return, to make a decent passive income every month, you are going to need an absolute wedge load of cash in there generating it. So instant income generation from investing, if you do not have a lot of money, like when I started investing, it's not great. Like, it's not, 6% of £100 is not going to pay any kind of bill. But over time, it will mount up. So initial income generation, it scores low for me. What sort of number are you feeling here, mate?
Well, yeah, 2 or 3. What do you? Yeah,
I'm happy with that.
yeah.
I just think some people start investing and think, investing is a long-term play. A minimum 5 years, ideally, like the longer the better because it will compound. So you don't start investing in stocks and shares and start pulling out dividends straight away because it will A, destroy your long-term returns, but B, like when I started investing, I was investing like £50 a month. I wasn't making much, but now 12 years later, that compounded for 12 years, and with subsequent investments on top of it, yeah, it's going all right, which kind of brings me on to wealth generation. I think this is a 5, mate. Like, this is a tried and tested way to get wealthy. This is how wealthy people got wealthy, by investing. So
Yeah.
unless I hear strong objections from you, I'm putting it at 5.
Sounds good.
All right, nice. Passive, you know, I literally look at my portfolio once a year when I do my annual financial review. A direct debit goes in every month automatically. Pay yourself first, something we've talked about loads in the past. So, I'm giving this a high passive rating. Again, I'm feeling a 5. Overrule me if you think I'm
No,
loving investing too much here,
go
but
for it.
it's passive, man.
Yeah, it is.
Genuine.
Yeah,
Tax.
it kind of depends on what you do.
Tax.
Yeah,
There's loads that you can do here tax wise. Like, as I said, taxation policy should drive your behavior. So the government is making it, you get £20,000 a year annual ICE allowance completely tax free. So I'm going to give it a 5 for tax. Do you think that's a bit strong?
no, I think five for ISAs, but even then,
All right.
if you're, it'd be worse if you're investing directly in certain companies, for example. But still, it's overall investing is you get better tax rates than income tax, for example. So it's still very good, but ISAs are the way forward.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can invest £20,000 per adult, and don't forget about the kids, right? £9,000 per kid. So in my family, me and my wife could do 20,000 each. I'd just like to say that we're not, but in theory we could, right? That's
nice.
40,000 plus 9 grand for each of the kids. That's a lot of tax-free investing per year. So I love it. Doing speed maths here. Help me out. Is that 21? Boom. All right. Investing comes strong. Okay. Final category. We've gone in a lot deeper than I was anticipating here, but I think it's useful because we've definitely covered this off thoroughly. Starting a business. This is a difficult part of the page for me to write on, but my hand is performing well. Okay. Business. So, yeah, I guess like starting a business, which obviously we do have some knowledge about. So, ease of starting.
It's difficult, isn't it? It's not massively easy to just set up a business. This is well, I guess we'll be supposing that already you've got your idea. You know exactly what you're doing, how to do it. Assuming you even know that, then actually enacting all of that is really tricky. How are you going to get the capital, the investment to put in there? Do you need premises? Do you need staff? Do you need all these things? How are you going to market it? How are you going to get the word out there? It is not massively easy, I would say. But then again, I'm sure there are people out there that
Yeah.
have business ideas that are, where setting up a business may be much easier. It kind of depends on the business, doesn't it? A little bit. But I still would say overall it's not that easy, especially getting the business going and getting the word out as well.
It does. And also, this is like first world entitled people's problems. But if you are a doctor, okay, you're already got a job which pays you a reasonable amount of money, okay? So what is the chance that you start a business, maybe in a completely different field to that one that you've trained, i.e. medicine? What is the chance that that is just going to start spitting out more money than you get paid as a doctor? In my opinion, incredibly low. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. It definitely could happen, but it's hard. So I'm feeling like ease of starting, it could be a 1.
Yeah, I'd go one or two. Yeah, well, I think one's pretty fair. Again, depends on the business, but yeah, one, I think. Let's go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Income generation. I guess I kind of just alluded to this, but again, just to say like, instant money. Well, I guess, you are going to get fairly, it depends what you choose. And if you're not sure what to choose, watch my previous YouTube video on that because I did kind of outline my 4-part framework about how I think about this. But instant income is possible, but I don't think it's going to be hard to beat your doctor salary, certainly in the early stages.
Yeah, there's every
What are your
chance.
thoughts?
You might actually make a loss in the first year or so. It's going to sound really bleak and negative, and I don't mean it to be at all because I love the idea of people setting up businesses. I think it's incredibly entrepreneurial and exciting. But I don't know what the stat is, but I think a vast amount of small businesses fail in the first few years. They make losses initially, and they can't sustain those losses. They don't really generate much income at all, if any, and they kind of go under. So that sounds really negative and bleak. I don't mean to be, but and then of course, in contrast, you might get a business that's just so stellar that from the bat, the income just kind of rolls in. But I think you're right. I think income generation, you know, especially in the first years, is going to be quite tricky, quite low.
Yeah, before we get to the score, I totally agree with what Ed said there. We're not being bleak here, we're just being realistic here. I think the media focuses on success stories and, everyone's got a 6-figure business, it seems. That is actually incredibly difficult to do. So if you've done that, well done. But back in the real world, I think it's harder than you think. And as you say, a majority of businesses fail within the first couple of years. So what should we go? 2?
Yeah, let's go for two. Average out between the
I
yeah.
feel, yeah. I mean, I'm so pro entrepreneurial, and I would love like loads of other doctors to start their own thing. And I love that so many of you out there are. So this is looking a bit bleak, but don't be put off. I'm just saying it's not easy. Right. Okay. Now we're getting good. Wealth generation. Now, I'm going to assume that this business works. This is a way to build intergenerational wealth in theory. So if you say I can't put a five, I want to hear a very good reason why I can't put a five for wealth generation, mate.
Well, I mean, it's again, I mean, the only reason to not put a five is just based on the fact that a lot of businesses actually do fail. But as you say, if you're assuming that the business is going to succeed, so that was your opening sentence before you started saying it's going to be a five, then yeah, if the business is going to succeed, it's brilliant. And your business, rolling up the capital and that, getting you know, you'll be a shareholder if you trade by a company. The shares in your business, the value will go up. Just yeah, it is excellent fourth generation if it succeeds, which you've just said we're going to assume it does. So go for it.
You might have talked me into a four there because I think you've raised some valid points. Let us know in the comments whether we should score that a five or a four. I think you've talked me into a four.
My
You've talked me down. Fair enough,
pessimist
mate.
negative attitude is keeping you down.
Stay away with your dose of accountant-based realism. Okay, passive income potential. I want to show you this one more time, okay? Because if you do not want to work more hours and stop trading 1 hour of your time for money, 1 hour of money, then there's only a few things on this list that we're making that satisfy this criteria. And starting your own business gets you in this bottom category where you are trading 1 hour potentially for many units of money. So I want to put five. You're going to drag me down to reality.
Well,
Talk me through it.
once you if you set up your business, and the ideal for a business naturally would be that you're going away and you're doing, let's say you're doing your normal doctor job, and in the background it's like churning out income and your bank balance is growing. But how many hours, how much activity are you going to be putting into that dual business, the growth, the kind of, I don't know, slog of growing it? But then it's the thing about that is as well. Even if you are kind of grafting and trying to get the business growing, usually though it's your own business, and that the excitement of doing that, the fact that you're actually doing something for yourself, makes it all the more worthwhile. So go for it. Give it a four.
Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, as soon as Ed started speaking, you'll see that I conceded my five down to a four. Yeah, again, I think you're absolutely right. Like a lot of people start a business think it's going to be passive income. Unfortunately, that is a myth. It is incredibly hard work to grow something. It takes a lot of time and passion and all the things I talked about in the previous YouTube video. I concede to you, sir, and four. I will bow to your opinion on the next category, tax. I guess we've already covered most of this.
Yeah, that's the thing. So if you're going to set up a business, you've got multiple different options for trading. You could be a sole trader, you could be set up as a company, you could even, and actually, like, in theory, it does work for other sections as well. You could even set up a partnership, or it's called a limited liability partnership with your spouse or civil partner, or a friend or a colleague, and that's another option you've got. And like I alluded to with the private work, this is probably more use. You're more likely to be able to one day, if it grows, if it succeeds, if you're doing really well, you might be able to one day sell that business and take advantage of the really generous capital gains tax rates that you've got in the UK, as opposed to, let's say, income tax rates. So, I think the tax situation is actually pretty good if you're here. I know we said three for private work, but I think in this case, given that you are more likely to be able to sell the business, I think I'll give it a four. To be honest, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I was feeling a four as well there. Okay, awesome. So quick maths, it's not that quick. Was that 15?
Yeah.
Okay, that was a massive session. That's the end of our mini series on YouTube on starting a side hustle. Just to reiterate, like, we are massively pro side hustle, but I think that last column is good for a dose of reality in our experience. In summary, for me, when I'm looking at this, so when I graduated, I don't want to go through my rags to, it's not really rags to riches, it's rags to not completely broke story. I did a ton of locum work, and that was great for cash flow. Interestingly, the rates for locum work haven't really changed in the last 10 years since I was doing it, which is absolutely shocking. The only thing I would say about doing a ton of locum work is just think about your mental health. You're already working incredibly long hours, and then you go and, I did some crazy long stints where I basically hardly ever saw my wife. It was necessary. I don't really miss those days. So just have a think about that. If you've got to do it, you've got to do it. I've been there. So sympathies.
Mm.
Private work, I think we're going to see more and more of this. I think, it's got on a 12 there, but you have a skill which you have trained incredibly hard to get. And if you want to pay your bills, including your student loan and all those years and years of being in debt, and the NHS is no longer paying you enough to cover that, it's the obvious thing. Hopefully, I'm not saying anything too controversial here, mate, but I think private work is going to explode real soon.
Yeah, no, definitely, and just actually, that's a good point. We should probably make sure we're clear on that. We're only looking at these what sort of five categories, and there are definitely other things to think about in all these things. And as you said, Tommy, you know, your time is a huge thing. Please don't, work yourself so hard that your mental health suffers and etc. That's really important to mention. Likewise, private work, you have a lot more flexibility as to how much you offer there, which a lot of people love. When you work, how you work, what you do, you might be able to charge higher fees, whatever. It's just, there's lots of things in there that we're not mentioning. So we're not saying, it looks like we're saying, oh, private work and doing a locum shift are pretty much the same sort of thing. That's definitely not what we're saying at all in this situation. And just on that point again, you mentioned about private work exploding. I mean, I think there's a recent survey saying that 43% of consultants that do private work are going to increase the amount that they do, which is a huge number. So I agree. I think it's going to explode.
Yeah, we've noticed a lot of consultants using Medic's money to, or other people using Medic's money to find a specialist medical accountant that actually understands private work. So based on that, we think it's exploding as well. And it's really important that you get a specialist medical accountant for this, not your average accountant. I think we've made that pretty clear over time. We're going a bit like deep and philosophical towards the end of this as well. But the older I get, the more I value time and health over money. And I suppose that's because once upon a time I had absolutely zero money. But now I'm starting to get to that point where I'm trading off the money versus the time with my family and etc. I'm not getting any younger. I mean, I'm getting old, mate. I'm doing a podcast in my slippers and tracky bees and talking about time versus money. So I'm going to move on quickly to talk about surveys. I say I did surveys back in the day. I'm probably going to do some more because we've got a sponsor that's kindly sponsoring Medic's Money that's doing it as well. I just think it's just like quick, easy. It doesn't take too much time. It's potentially very lucrative depending on your speciality and your grade. I love surveys as like quick money. And in the States, I hear of doctors doing, 5-figure amounts on surveys. Not sure anyone's doing that in this country, but if you are, let us know in the comments. Property investing, I think tax is tricky, but not an insurmountable problem. You do need capital to start. I know there's like people advertising on Facebook like I didn't have any capital down and I bought these 10 blocks of flats. Yeah, that's because they're absolutely leveraged. They're borrowing a ton of money. It ain't a great time to borrow a ton of money right now. And getting over leveraged is one of the absolute rookie mistakes that you can make out there. But long term, as a long-term wealth generation, I like property. Don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So I haven't got down that route, but I don't have the capital to do it. But yeah, I mean, for those people for whom it works really well. As you say, the long term gains. Yes, properties are going down in value at the moment, but overall, in general, if you look at the long term game, the wealth generation is amazing. So pretty good.
Yeah. And as you sort of said, you can have an asset which cash flows, i.e., pays you money every month. And at the end, if you dispose of it, there's various ways that you can dispose of it in a reasonably tax efficient way or pass it on to the next generation. So I like that, but I don't like it as much as I love investing. I just think stocks and shares, ISA, every month on autopilot, however much you can afford. Start early, just keep it simple. And then when you get to age 55 and you're completely burnt out from working in the NHS and you've still got to wait until 68 to take your NHS pension, you can just get all of that money that you've got from investing and retire when you want. So take control. I just think the government are making it so easy with like ISAs and everything. The platforms are making it so easy. A little bit of knowledge, which you definitely need to consider, or taking financial advice and you're in.
Yeah,
But I know you love investing as well. So
yeah, and also don't
it's
forget
hard to get a balanced perspective.
if you're under 40, don't forget you've also got the option of a lifetime ISA as well, where the government will top it up by 25%. So you put that, if you've got £4,000, I know a lot of people don't, but you can put up to £4,000 into a lifetime ISA if you're younger than 40, like me and Tommy. But putting £4,000 into a stocks and shares LISA, the government will put in an extra £1,000 into it for you, and then hopefully that will just grow and grow and grow. So definitely consider that as well.
Yeah. Final category, starting a business. I think if you think you fulfill the criteria that I talked about in the very first episode of this series, which was that you've got an idea that solves a problem for lots of people, you've got a plan to monetize it, you're very passionate about it, and you have some kind of unfair advantage, which means that you are the best person to do that, then business can make a lot of sense. And I guess the final thing to say is that I'm all in on diversification of everything, income streams, assets, everything. Diversification is the only free lunch investing. I've done a YouTube video about that. You don't have to just do property investing. And I do see this quite a lot. Like, people just do property investing. Why don't you do a bit of property and a bit of stocks and shares investing? Diversify. Then if property goes down, stock market's on the up, overall, you're still winning. If you can get yourself into a position where you're always winning, you're going to be in a great position. And likewise, if you're at the start of your career or you're struggling for cash like I was back in the day, you do have a monetizable skill here as a doctor. And your monetizable skill is to help people and make them better. And I still think, even though I have all these other things going on, I still think being a doctor is the best job in the world. I mean, we get paid to help people and make them better. So, yeah.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, definitely diversification of income assets, brilliant. Definitely worth thinking about. And like you say as well, yeah, if you meet all those criteria about setting up your own business, doing it is such a great thing to do. When it works, it's such a beautiful thing to grow your own business. It's so exciting.
Yeah, definitely. It really is. Awesome. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this useful, if you could leave us a rating, hit subscribe. If you leave us a review, that even helps even better. And mainly, if you think this would help one of your friends, and we're all in this together, remember, just tell your friends about it. I hope it helps, and see you on the next episode.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Bloody hell, that went mammoth.